Toot Norberling would like to welcome you to Taking the Essence, an introduction to the nature of reality. We're here with Eddie Peet at Langri Tampa Center in Brisbane, Australia.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Hi, everybody. Welcome along to this first course on the nature of reality. So we're going to be basing it around the Heart Sutra. So what we'll do is to take refuge together with the refuge field in front of us and generate a mind of enlightenment so that our understanding is not just to benefit ourselves, but to benefit all sentient beings. So please adjust your posture, get comfortable in your seat. Try to make sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. You can keep your eyes open or closed, whatever suits you best. And to begin with, I just want you to allow the body to breathe itself and for you to become aware of the movements that take place whenever you inhale or exhale. And the purpose for doing this is just to focus the mind and to bring a state of relaxation to the mind and the body. You're breathing normally and naturally. And the Buddha and his spiritual entourage appear in the space above us. Surrounding us are all sentient beings. And we find that we're able to recollect our purpose for taking refuge in the Buddha, his spiritual entourage, and the teachings. So please bring this purpose to mind now. Oh, gosh. So we're missing a whole lot of things here. So, okay, Buddhas are in front of us. Take refuge in the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Now recollect the four immeasurable thoughts of loving kindness, great compassion, mind of joy, and the mind of equanimity. Make the wish that all beings possess these four immeasurable thoughts, and then decide to help all beings establish themselves in these four immeasurable thoughts. Then recollect that we're before the refuge field and follow along with me if you can, or if you know it off by heart, just recite along with me. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time. I rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. Now make an offering of a mandala. I think that by doing so, clinging to the merit is put to an end. You think that the Buddha accepts the mandala and he smiles at us, so we look up into his eyes so we feel accepted and at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart, moves through space, and comes to abide above the crown of your head. This emanation descends, entering the crown of your head, coming down to the level of your heart, whereby its radiance begins to expand, filling your body and mind with light. And the light goes out through the pores of your skin and fills all of space. And wherever there are beings within space, think that they're touched by that light and fully transformed into the awakening state. Acknowledge that there's no difference between yourself and anyone else. In fact, self and others are just ideas. Ideas without any true existence. Then the light begins to withdraw and re-enter your heart. You feel yourself embodied, sitting on the seat you're in. You acknowledge that this meditation is on the level of imagination and has put in the mind an imprint for its actuality. So we take joy in that. And now just breathe in deeply through your nostrils and then exhale through your mouth. Now, I just want to, Miffy, I think, we'll see.
This is the wrong version of the...
I've got a different version of the class.
Yep. You do. This is the one before I worked on it, but it should be okay.
I don't think it will be. I think it's not going to be okay. I think we'll see.
So you need
a couple of pages and we'll see. Yeah, so this is...
Okay, so you need to get the one from the that I gave you on the stick. Where did you put it?
Okay, folks, so you're going to have to...
So just stop the screen share, and I'll come in.
Okay. Gosh, sorry, guys. Okay, let's have a look. I'll just take these through.
There's one other thing to do. Just stop the share for a moment. You have to get rid of one thing.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's all right. Yep.
Back to share.
Yep.
Okay, here we are at our beginning. Sorry about that. Let's start. So what are our topics for the next 5 weeks? We're going to look at some of the benefits of studying this sutra. An outline for the sutra. I've got two here. We're going to start with a really simple one today. What the sutra means and how we can apply it to our lived lives. And today we're really going to be looking at just a few moments we're going to spend on the benefits of study, this outline, and I'm going to introduce to you the sutra and show how we actually engage in it. And some of the books I've been able to use are these here, and of course I've got a new one, which is fantastic, about the object of negation, but that will come next week. So I'll put that new book up then.
So everybody take a photo of these books, like with your phone if you can, so that you can go and find them online or in your local Dharma Center library. And Eddie, when with the new book, when you stop the share, then hold up the new book then.
Okay. So I just had to leave to go to my bookcase and get that new book. Now, look,
good.
This book here, Essence of the Heart Sutra by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I think it's by Venerable Thupten Jinpa, does the editing. It's fantastic. I've used that a lot. This book here by Geshe Zopa, many of you might not have it. It's got a terrific section on the paths, when they say gati gati, paragati, parasamgati bodhisattva, and there's a lovely explanation of how each of those words relate to each path. Up here, insight into emptiness. I particularly like this for the information on things like how forms are empty, the different types of analogies I use to show what is empty and how it's empty. This book here by Karl Brunholzer is fantastic too. It just gives you a different take on it. In fact, like, you get something from all of these books. And what is really, what I like about having so much material is it gives you a little, just a slightly different take on things. So in some ways, sometimes it's not clear to you, and you're sort of stuck. It's not falling right. But then you come across with another book, and it's like, now the Lama has said it in a slightly different way, and now it becomes easier to comprehend. Anyway, next week we'll have the new book up, but in the meantime, this is what it looks like. In case it's called Searching for the Self. And it's the 7th book in the series by the Dalai Lama with Venerable Thupten Chodron. This is called The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. Now, what is fantastic about this is the explanation of the object of negation. But we'll talk about, I'll use most of that for next week. Let's have a look what else we've got. So we've got a lot of material to call upon for studying. We'll have talk about the sutra today. So we should ask ourselves, like, what's the point? Especially when we come to this particular sutra. So first of all, you should know that we should understand that the subject matter of the Heart Sutra is the foundation of all other fields of knowledge. The foundation for all other fields of knowledge. The other thing that you become aware of is the great kindness of the Buddha in explaining emptiness and dependent origination, and showing us how these two fit together. When you see how you've been misapprehending phenomena and what follows from that misapprehension, I think you cannot fail to appreciate the kindness of Buddha, of showing us, like, this is what's going on, this is how we're creating our own suffering, but this is how you can put an end to it. And so, but what we've got to do, I guess, is to take refuge in this understanding. So what we're going to see here is that everything that exists does so dependently. And because it exists dependently, it has no intrinsic existence. Which means we have to be very careful in what we do. There are consequences for every act of our body, speech, and mind. And so all we can take refuge in is the knowledge that acts done with virtue produce happiness, and acts created with non-virtue produce suffering. And we should take refuge in that, and then allow our behaviors to follow this understanding. Then we'll be working in harmony with cause and effect, and cause and effect is one aspect of dependent arising. That effects depend upon causes and conditions. And as they are dependent, they are empty of any intrinsic nature. So this is like the foundation of all knowledge. Miffy, yes?
Eddie, don't forget to stop the screen share every now and again, please,
Okay,
so we can see you.
Much. Yep, okay. So here are 3 benefits of study. Of course, there are many, many others, but these are the ones that really stood out to me. To know that within the sutra, we're covering all the objects of knowledge, and that to understand that all of them lack an intrinsic nature. And this is the foundation of all knowledge. Whatever exists does so dependently without intrinsic nature. We appreciate the kindness of the Buddha because we've actually been behaving as if phenomena did have an intrinsic nature. And this has created all of our suffering, which leads us to take refuge. Now, when we talk about sutras, you might have an idea that the sutras were, the words are just spoken by the Buddha and then they're sort of written down. But this wouldn't be full comprehension of what this word sutra means. So I want to just go into that for the moment, because it does have some bearing on the sutra called the Heart Sutra. There are actually three categories of sutra. Those that have come across through the blessings of the Buddha's body. So one sutra for that, I've given an example of each one, it's called the 10 Grounds Sutra. So it said it came out of the top knot of the Buddha, of his body. The second is from the Buddha's speech. So these are ones we'd be quite familiar with. An example is the relieving the remorse of Ajata Shastra Sutra. This is a sutra about a man, the prince who'd killed his father. And he was in great agony about that, and then went to see the Buddha, and then the Buddha spoke to him. And the words are recorded, and we have that sutra. So Buddha's body, speech, and mind. And then we have the ones that come from the Buddha's mind. We have those coming from the it's called the truth, his truth revealed through the mind. So how would we have a teaching like that? What would be an illustration of something like that? So that is when sometimes when the leaves in the trees move and you hear the sound, there's leaves rustling, but you also hear something else. So like what you might hear, for instance, is that you understand, for instance, it could happen that you understand that sound is a dependent arising, and therefore it's empty. So just hearing the leaves. Miffy.
Eddie, that's a little bit like in our Western canon, when Newton discovered gravity just by seeing an apple fall from a tree, isn't it?
Yeah, like that. That's right, like that. Yeah. So you understand something else. Then there are the teachings that come through about the wisdom. So this might be when what they call it, the unintentional utterance. So Robina told us a great story, So she was telling me one time she was sitting there with Lama Yeshe, and he just said to her, "What do you think's your greatest delusion, dear?" And she said, without even thinking, my mouth opened up and out came words that I had no idea I was going to say. But as soon as I said them, I knew it was true. So, I mean, that can sort of happen. Then we have the last one called the power of concentration. And this Heart Sutra is an illustration of that. The words that come about through the power of the Buddha's concentration. Now, we also have these other three categories, which are the words spoken by the Buddha himself. So you find that this could all fit into these, what's happened before, these 6 here. So, but in the Heart Sutra, it's these words, well said, well said. Any of you are familiar with the Heart Sutra, there's a section that comes and says, well said, well said. It's just like that, just like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just like that. So these are words actually spoken by Buddha. Then we have words spoken with the permission of the Buddha. So these are words like thus I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was dwelling on Massive Vulture's mountain and so forth. So these are not actually said by the Buddha, but with the permission. So one of his disciples sort of written these words out. said, so these words were permitted by the Buddha. They were added after the actual teaching by a bodhisattva or a disciple. And there's a way of sort of introducing the teaching that follows. So most of you will be familiar with these words also of a sutra. And finally, we have words that originate from the Buddha's blessing. And this is where we have the power of concentration comes in. So here we have something like, as you know, that how the sutra is set up, the Buddha is giving a great teaching to many bodhisattvas and Arya beings, all sorts of people from all these different realms and so forth. But they're all just sitting there quietly. And then Shariputra asks the question. And so this is an example of words that originate from the Buddha's blessing. Now, these perfection of wisdoms, there are many of them. And so I'll just show you a few that I've come across. This is how they talk about them sometimes. So the great and the medium no longer exist in this world, but the concise 100,000 verses in 12 volumes does. And so there's a great scholar who has written this material down a number of years ago. So we have middle length, we have extensive, middle length, and we have the condensed. The Heart Sutra that we're studying is actually this bottom one here. It's called the concise version. It only has 25 verses in it. When the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras are studied in the monasteries, it's from 5 to 7 years of studying different lengths of text, as well as the commentaries on them. And so this Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, especially the Heart Sutra, you've probably come across it in the Tibetan tradition, and you might have also come across it in the Zen or Japanese tradition. And if you have, you'll know that they're quite different. There's still a Heart Sutra, but the Tibetan version often starts off with a preamble. It tells you, thus I've heard at one time, and it goes through like that. But the Zen or Japanese starts off straight away with Avalokiteshvara coursing in the deep. It begins like, we're right in. We're into the path of seeing straight away. Whereas the Tibetan is quite an introduction beforehand. And in the Tibetan and the Japanese, there's a section that we'll come up to where we talk about this perfection of wisdom on the paths of accumulation and preparation. And when we talk about there, there's a thing they call the 4 profundities. You probably know it, but it's going, form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, form is not other than emptiness. So we're talking about here the profound nature of form. And this way of using the 4 is common to the Tibetans and the Japanese. But in my mistake. The Chinese and the Tibetans, they use the 4 profundities. The Japanese use the 6. So again, there's going to be slight difference. I just want to let you know this. So if you ever pick one up and you go, gee, don't think, there's a mistake here.
Or there's something
There's
missing.
a different way of explaining it. That's all.
So, Eddie, I remember when we did a pilgrimage in Brisbane here, just to various different Buddhist centers from different lineages. So we recited the Heart Sutra together at each place, because that was the thing that we had in common. And even though they recited in their own language, you could recognize the various sections, but they did have, some of them were much, much shorter than the one that we're used to with the Tibetan.
Yeah.
Didn't have the preamble to it.
So our focus will be today on this concise version of 25 verses, but I should also let you know that there's one other version of the Heart Sutra. Yeah. And it's this, it's just one syllable. It's the syllable A. And this A is a negation. It negates inherent existence. All phenomena are without inherent existence. And this is what this little syllable represents. Okay, so let's have a look. I'll introduce you now to the first.
Eddie, are you saying that the syllable "a" is the Heart Sutra?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
It's all the Heart Sutras condensed into one syllable, one symbol, one syllable. So you'll see later on when I explain how the Heart Sutra, how the answers were given by Avalokiteshvara. This particular one was left out. But you can see it had to be for a very, very, very bright person, wouldn't it? If you just saw that and went, got it. That's not likely to happen. Nevertheless, the essence of all the Heart Sutra, like I said, and the essence is this negation.
You'd have to be a bit like Newton to be able to get this in one word.
Yeah, somebody who's very bright, that's for sure. So let's have a look now at the first outline I'm going to give you. So it's quite simple, right? It's just made up of these four parts. So I like it with a four-chambered heart. So we've got the heart, just break it into four and go. In the Tibetan tradition, we always begin with the title. Then there's a homage made. Then the actual sutra itself. And it concludes. It finishes off with a colophon that most of you are probably familiar with. Now, a number of years ago, when His Holiness was coming to Australia, and he was going to give a teaching on the Heart Sutra in Melbourne. And so I thought, I've got to get the class ready to get to, so we can sort of sit down and be relaxed and just listen to him talk. And so I'd gone through a number of these different books, and I thought, wow, they spent a lot of time on the title. So I thought I'd better become familiar with this knowledge and then impart it to the class. It took 1.5 hours, right, to go through the title. And, when we went to His Holiness, he did exactly the same. So I was so happy. And all the people in our class were looking down from the stalls, giving me the thumbs up. So, oh, thank God you spent 1.5 hours on the title, because His Holiness has just done the same thing and we can follow along. We're not lost. But here I'm not going to do that. We don't have that much time. But let you know, the title is given in Sanskrit, Tibetan, and English. Then the homage can be, I've got 3 different types of homage, one by the FPMT, one by, his first name was Casey, but his surname was Cons. So he was the original English translator.
Edward?
Edward Cons, thank you, Iffy. Yeah, Edward Cons. So there's also a homage by him. But then there's also the homage that the different colleges give before they begin it. And these are all different. So again, just to let you know, it might be a little confusing. So as you think, oh, they always say this, the homage is always homage to the Arya Triple Gem. But then you see a different type of homage and you go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? So there are a number of different objects of homage. There's the purpose for doing it, and you can learn something about the actual text you're getting in as well. Then we begin the subject matter, and you can see it, it's just 2 parts of it. There's the prologue, and then the actual sutra. And the prologue is also made up of 2 parts. There's one called the common prologue, and then there's called the uncommon prologue. And finally, we get into the actual sutra. It's so simple, isn't it? We have a question, we have a response. Buddha says, yep. And then everybody goes, yoo-hoo, delight. So the sutra itself is pretty much straightforward. And today, like I said, so I'm going to give you like an overview of this whole thing. And then the next 4 weeks, we'll get into it in depth. So this is one way of having an outline. There's another way which I'll show next week. We have 10 points. It just breaks it up to define it. And you'll see this again and again when you go into the books. Well, look at this. Actually, you could break it down into 3, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So here we have it in these 3. And what I've done here is put different colors to show where the Sanskrit ties in with the Tibetan. And how in English it's just Heart Sutra. Really, the essence of it, I guess. This term, I'll just mention a couple of things, right? So Bhagavati has this connotation of mother. And what it is a mother of is wisdom, which is the next word, prajna, or shrub down the bottom here. So where does all this wisdom, this thing is this mind, this which is indestructible. From it comes this wisdom, which brings about all the forms of enlightened being. So we have the hearers and the solitary realizers, we have the Buddhas, and we have the Bodhisattvas. And all of them have arisen from this wisdom. So this wisdom is called the mother. Bhagavati, and I don't know how to pronounce this, but I do it by silly English because that way I can memorize. You know, I go Bikram Alden Dasma. Of course, I'd never say it like that, but in my mind, when I say it, I go, okay, so I've got a little B, a big C, Bikram Alden Dasma. So I could, if I say it like that, which is not correct, it helps me memorize it. That's certainly, you know, that helps me. Anyway, so I'll just, like I said, just introduce these ideas to you, and then we can get into a bit more next week, and I can break down some of these things. Bikram Laden Desma and Bhagavati really is talking about a destroyer. So this mother is a destroyer of all the afflictive and cognitive obscurations. And what destroys them? The wisdom that realizes this emptiness. So I think that should be enough there for now. And this is the place where the sutra actually took place. So here we have this, thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was abiding on Massive Vulture's, was dwelling in Massive Vulture's Peak. So this is Massive Vulture's Peak. This is where the teaching took place. And this part I just said was what's called the common prologue. It tells you who was there. It tells you who the audience was. It tells you what the place was, and it tells you what the time was. So they call these the 4 excellences. But there's one more, and this other excellence is called the excellence of the teaching. But because the teaching hasn't actually taken place yet, it's not included within the 4. Right? Now, thus do I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling. This is like the common thing. Now, later on, as we go through the sutra, they say, now here's the excellence of the teaching. You know, when he goes, well said, well said. You know, that was an excellent teaching.
So Eddie, I haven't been to Vulture's Peak before, but what I have done is had a look at it on Google Earth, and I'd recommend everybody have a look, because what doesn't come across here is that it's right on the edge of this enormous mountain range that overlooks this really, really long valley, and the sense of being up high like that really comes across when you look on Google Earth, and then you can zoom in as if you were a bird yourself.
Let's see. we have, like I said, two prologues. I'll go into those in more depth next week. But like I said, the common one just tells you like who was there, what place it was, and so forth. Now, what's uncommon is the weird thing. It's like the Buddha's in this. He's in meditation on the profound. And what's strange here is that while he's in this concentrated state, he's going to influence Shariputra to ask the question. And so this is the uncommon part of the prologue. So it sets it up for the engagement with the wisdom to begin. And so all the section is really, you could say it's all part of the introduction to the sutra. The title, the homage, and the two types of prologue. They're all an introduction to the sutra in one way of looking at it. So now we can engage in it. And like I said, we engage in it through these four parts. Shariputra asks this question: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? So we know from this, these people, all of them here, have the mind of enlightenment. They have bodhicitta. It's just like they're sort of saying, well, we have bodhicitta, we have the mind of enlightenment. What do we do once we have it? And so Avalokiteshvara answers. As we go through, at the end, the Buddha says, well said, and the assembly is delighted. And they decide to practice in that way. Now, Miffy, what's the time we finished today? Is it 12:30, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just want to keep my eye on the time so I don't run out of time here.
Yeah, 12:30.
Yeah. Or I go so fast.
This thing that you just said is has always surprised me, because I just assume, the Heart Sutra, it's from the Buddha, but actually it's not. I mean, it is, but it's not the Buddha who speaks it, is it?
Well, the Buddha speaks part of it. So this is what you see when I brought up that other thing before about the sutras. You see, in fact, this Heart Sutra has all of those things in it. It has words not spoken by the Buddha. It has the Buddha himself. His words spoken with the permission of the Buddha, but then there's words also spoken by the Buddha himself. So let's have a look now at, I'm going to bring it now to Avalokiteshvara's answer. And we have a little section with the text on that. So here we have Avalokiteshvara's answer. So you can see his answer actually begins here with the word any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage. So he says any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this: correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So we look at the first line, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage. So one thing you could say from that straight away is men and women are able to develop this wisdom. Doesn't matter what sex you are. Right? Men and women can achieve the wisdom realizing emptiness. But what does the lineage refer to? So the lineage here is those who are interested in full awakening for the benefit of others. The lineage of the bodhisattvas is the lineage here they're talking about. Those who have acknowledged that they have the nature of Buddha within them, the mind being empty of any intrinsic nature, and wishing to develop that mind to its fullest extent for the benefit of others. These are the people in the lineage. So if you wish to practice any activity that's founded on that, then you need to do it like this. He says, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So also is quite an interesting word here. So many times as you go through this Heart Sutra, you'll see that the word also has different meanings. So one of the meanings of also here is, when we are to, the advice given for us to meditate, when we meditate on the emptiness of inherent existence. So we need to pick some objects. So here they're saying the objects here are those five aggregates. So those would be the objects here. They're saying repeatedly beholding those five aggregates and seeing them to be empty of any inherent nature. Now that's not easy. That's a hard thing to do. And what they often suggest we do is we take the I itself. Let's have a look at I, self, and see how that can be without inherent existence, how it could be empty of inherent existence. So we could do that. We could do the I. And then once you've done that, which is reasonably simple, then we move along to the five aggregates, to all the other phenomena. So this could mean here, after discerning the emptiness of self, emptiness of the person, we move to all the other phenomena. And those would include the five aggregates. But it could also go, behold those five aggregates also could also refer to everything else that's not the five aggregates. And you'll see there's a lot of objects that are not five aggregates, but they're empty too. And in the next slide, I'm going to show that when Avalokiteshvara gives his answer, he gives it in three ways. There's three parts to this answer here. So one, he gives a very brief explanation, and this is it. Look upon it like this: correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So that's the very briefest answer that he gives. Then he gives a more elaborate answer, and that's basically the rest of the material that comes. Now, form is empty, emptiness is form. He goes all the way up till finally the Buddha says, well said, well said. Now, that's this really extensive answer. So let's move on, and I'll show you again how the replies are given. So he's going to give this answer here for two types of people: really sharp, intelligent, people of a high capacity of learning, knowledge, open-minded, sharp-minded, all these sorts of things. Like, for instance, somebody who could just see the syllable ah and go, I got it. But I understand. So that probably doesn't include us. So for people who have less capacity than those people, probably us, he gives us a brief explanation, and then he gives us a very extensive explanation. And like I said, the brief one was just look upon it like this correctly and do it repeatedly. Look at these five aggregates and then have a look at all these other objects. But for those who are very sharp faculties, perhaps people who could just see that syllable ah, or just hear the mantra. In fact, the mantra itself is the training given for those with superior faculties. So you heard gati gati, paragati, parasamgati bodhisattva, you got it. You go, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. but again, that's probably not us. Nevertheless, we'll go down and we'll have a look at this explanation for those with sharp faculties, superior faculties. And finally, in the answer, like he sums it all up. So just a few words. He just says, well, this is what I've been saying. And Avalokiteshvara says, this is what I've been saying, and I exhort you to practice it in this way. Now, this brief explanation when he said to correctly and repeatedly behold the five aggregates to be empty of inherent nature. The brief explanation. This explanation is like a way for helping us to engage in the wisdom, realizing emptiness, on the paths of accumulation and preparation. This means that we have a correct conceptual understanding of what emptiness is and what it is negating, inherent existence. So this is, I'd suggest, it won't do any harm for us if we thought, well, I'm certainly not on the path of seeing. I haven't seen emptiness directly. I'm basically still learning about this. So as a way of learning, I'll listen to what the teachers have to say. I will get reading material that will help me understand it. I might even go online and find other teachers that I have a great respect for and listen to what they have to say. Then I'll take that aside and I'll put it down and then I'll start to think about it. And my thinking has to be reasonable. So I've got to actually know how this works. Miffy, yep.
I'm just remembering when you say that about our thing has to be reasonable. Our friend, dear Cheryl, who when we read the Heart Sutra out, and she said, "Why does it have to be so negative? Why didn't they put it in the positive? It's no this, no that. It doesn't make any sense. It's so negative." And she was really down about the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying here is we need to sort of like our understanding, derives from listening, reading. We probably don't have, in the Tibetan tradition, of course, they debate with one another to try and really get it straight.
She was coming from a Western psychology point of view. So, of course, if you hear there's no this and no that and whatever, it does sound negative. Rather than coming from a Buddhist point of view, it's liberating.
Yeah, you could say I get what Cheryl's saying. She's saying like a negative from a psychological viewpoint and negative as being not good. But negative has other connotations too. Negative is like the absence of something. This speaker is talking. This whole sutra is talking about the absence of a quality that phenomena do not have. So exactly, if you have phenomena have qualities or characteristics, and you go, and none of those characteristics intrinsically exist. None of them objectively exist. That's what these phenomena that have the characteristics, those characteristics are without objective existence. Each of them relies upon something else for their existence. So we need to find what some of these terms would mean. And we're doing this on the paths of accumulation and preparation. We're getting ready to have a direct insight into emptiness. But before we get to direct insight into emptiness, we better make sure that we're going to get a correct insight onto the proper object, the object that is not there. We've got to make sure that that's what we're seeing, that what I thought was there is not there. Otherwise, we were mistaken. So this really requires, which we're going to talk about next week. I'll spend quite a bit of time on this, if you don't mind, because I think it's just so valuable and useful. And that is, what is it that things are empty of? We say inherent existence. And you go, well, of course, inherent existence doesn't exist. And you might say, well, yeah, I do. And so what does something that does not exist, what would it look like if it did exist? Because that's what we've got to know. We've got to find this thing that doesn't exist appears to. And I've been buying into that appearance for a long, long time. That's what you've been telling me. All my problems will be coming from a misunderstanding of my own. I've seen and believed an inherent existent phenomenon when there was none there at all. So what is this thing you're telling me is inherent existence? What is it? So that's what we've got to know, right? And when we can really see clearly, oh my God, it's impossible for such a thing to exist. We go, hey, now we've got it. At least we've got an intellectual, and I can even introduce you to some meditations where you can actually see, oh my gosh, if my body or myself were to intrinsically exist, I should be apprehending it. I should be able to see it right now because I've done everything in my power to see it, and it's not there. It's not there. So then you know it doesn't exist. Inherently is this or inherently is that, and because these are the only two options, it does not inherently exist. We can actually see that absence even in an ordinary meditation we could go through, and you could see something's not there. It's a correct, we've got to have that, this correct conceptual understanding, the correct idea. We've got to have the correct idea here. So that's the most important thing. So this is what they call, leading us into the heart of the matter. So I'll just go back now to the next slide and we'll go through these and I'll show you what I mean.
Eddie, do you just want to check if anyone has any questions so far?
Ah, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good idea. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask about so far? So far we've covered the introduction to it, which is basically the title. There's a homage, which we really didn't talk about much. There's the two prologues, and we've had Shariputra ask his question. Shariputra has answered very briefly, but now he's going to go into more detail, and that's what we're going to do next. But before we do the more detail, is there anything you'd like to say or ask? Yes,
Eddie,
Barbara. Yep.
the question that I have is the meditation that you just referenced.
Yeah.
Will you be leading us through that?
Oh, yeah, easy, for sure. I'm really familiar with it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so shall we go on? Let's do that. Okay, so we're now going to have a look at what they call the heart of the matter. The thing that we're really most familiar with. It's called the 4 profundities. And so they're called profundities because they're really hard to get your head around. It's profound stuff we're going to be talking about now. So this is how it starts. So it goes, form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form is also not other than emptiness. So here we're looking at the profound nature of form. So form is like anything that's physical, access through eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and basically it's atomic in nature. So we said all phenomena like that are empty of an intrinsic nature. They have no intrinsic nature. And the form that is empty of intrinsic nature is actually the form.
Mm-hmm.
And emptiness is not other than the form, and form is not other than emptiness. So we'll come along to each of those. So this is how it's the kernel of it is, but the next sentence is, in the same way, feeling, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. So this is following on from when you see we should repeatedly and consistently look at these 5 aggregates. So here we have the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. So now we're sort of expanding the thing. So the aggregate of form is being taken as the first basis. And I think what's useful to know is that once you can find the emptiness of one phenomena, you know how to find the emptiness of all phenomena. The process, you just do the same. The process is always the same. It doesn't matter whether it's form, feeling, discriminational, whatever. So as we go through these classes, I want to introduce to like what I think is the simplest way of doing it. And then you can expand out from that. You know, there's 5 or 6 other ways you can do it also, but you should, over time, expand your reasoning capacities by trying to have a look at these other reasons. Let's have a look now at these 4 profundities of form. Now, the first is the profundity of the ultimate, meaning here we're talking about the ultimate truth nature of all phenomena. And it is that all phenomena ultimately are empty of intrinsic nature. So you say form is empty, feelings are empty, discrimination is empty, consciousness is empty. All phenomena are empty of any intrinsic nature. Now, when you're talking like that, we're really talking here about the truth of the profound, the ultimate truth. So form here is a conventional truth. The emptiness of form is the ultimate truth. So whatever phenomena we have first up, that's going to be the basis, and that's going to be a conventional truth. The ultimate truth about that conventional truth is that it is empty of any intrinsic nature and exists dependently.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at these 4 profundities, I found it helpful, and it just makes it easier for me to go, okay, when we do the first one, form is empty. We're talking about the ultimate truth here, the ultimate truth of form. The next 3 are not about the ultimate truth of this form. They are about the conventional nature of this form, but it's the subtle conventional nature. And this next 3 parts are harder to realize than the first.
Mm-hmm.
So try to hold that in mind. The first one is the ultimate truth of form. The next is the subtle conventional truth of these forms. So you might say, so what's the
Of course.
what's the conventional truth that is not subtle about these forms?
Mm.
You know, you might ask that. And you go, well, this is what's not subtle about form. It's color, it's shape, that it disintegrates. That's common to everybody's knowledge.
So it is that the things that are like the parts and the causes and the conditions, they're the more coarse, conventional
realities.
Okay.
Yeah. So we could say that the forms are produced, therefore they're impermanent. They have parts, so their whole depends upon the parts. If the form is suitable for an eye consciousness, it has color and shape. If the form is suitable to be heard, it'll have other types of characteristics. If it's to be tasted, it has other characteristics. And these are, if you ate something and said, what's it like? You go, it's quite sweet. Right? So that's just the conventional nature. It's not the subtle. Okay, is this okay for everyone so far? So here what we're saying now is the emptiness of the form is the form. So don't worry, we'll go into a bit more depth about each of these. I'll just introduce them first. And seeing the third one is form. Emptiness is not other than form. So form and its emptiness are not two separate phenomena. They're not two separate things like a dog and a cow or a person in the house. They are one entity in the same way that the shape of your body and your body are one entity. Right? They're not the same, but they are one entity. And this is saying here, emptiness and its phenomena, form, they are one entity. You do not have form here and emptiness separate from it. Form and the emptiness of form are never, ever separate from one another. Is that clear?
Somehow the emptiness is not other than form. I find easier to get than emptiness is form. So
Yes, that's right. That's right. It is. That's exactly right. This second one is the most difficult to get your head around.
Okay, so I'll relax.
Yeah. The second is the most difficult of the rest. It's the most difficult. These other ones I think are a bit easier, but then to come to the second, and that's the hardest. Like I said, altogether, this is harder than the first one. Form is empty. All we have to do in terms of form is empty is know what intrinsic nature is, and then we go, of course, it can't have it. It doesn't have. That makes perfect sense to me. That's where you get that. But then the next, that's hard. The last one, form is also not other than emptiness. So here we can, it's saying that here they're nominally distinct. So it's not saying that they are, again, they're not separate from one another, but we can distinguish one from another. In the same way, we could distinguish a person's shape from the person. That's possible, isn't it? We can look at the shape of a person and say, oh, like a very long, he's a long person, he's a long, thin person. Long, thin, tall. So you must say, well, that's the sort of the shape. But what about themselves? Tell me about them. And then you start talking about the person, right? But, like again, you can't find the length, the shape, and so forth of the person that's separate from the person, right? They're together. But we can talk of them, we can talk about them as being two different things. So they're nominally distinct. So here we can, because we can talk about form, for instance, being a conventional truth. And the ultimate, the emptiness of form being a ultimate truth. And an ultimate truth and a conventional truth are not the same thing. Yet they, you say, inhabit one singular basis. But for form, for instance, there's form and its emptiness is one in nature with its form. You don't find it somewhere else. It's indistinct from the form. So we can talk about the form as being a conventional truth, its color, its shape, its density, the atomic nature of it, all those sort of different things, all the conventionalities about the form, while knowing at the very same time, that form has no intrinsic nature. And its lack of intrinsic nature is one with the form. And like I said, we can talk about the conventional nature of form, and we can also talk about its empty nature.
Kodo has a question.
Sure, Kodo, yep.
I studied a lot of biology and chemistry, and so we were all about atoms and electrons and spaciousness. And even though I'm sitting at my van and this wooden table, it's vibrating
Sure, yeah.
atoms with basically emptiness. So is that the emptiness is form? Is that number two? Or is that number one?
It's not number one. It's definitely not number one.
It's not number
No,
one.
No, what you're talking about there is the conventional nature of the form.
So
but-
that would be number two.
Yes, we're talking about, yeah, we're talking all the way down here, 2, 3, and 4.
Right, but in my mind, I need to get it straight. In my mind, when I kind of relate to things and meditate on them, or when I'm working in the garden, etc., it's all just vibrating atoms.
Yep, okay, and that's the conventional nature of it.
That's number two.
Yep. So this conventional nature,
Okay.
right, vibrating and so forth, depends for something else for its existence.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Why
And that's
is
fine.
one,
Yeah, yeah.
why
right.
are some vibrating atoms a zinnia and some are a cosmos or a cucumber or a whatever, right? Or soil or me, right?
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you, we'll go into a bit more in depth in this one, because like I said, this is the most difficult one, emptiness
Okay.
is form.
Thank
And it
you.
really requires us to, for one thing, remember, now we're into the conventional nature of the object. It's the subtle conventional nature.
And so,
And-
Eddie, when you're talking about conventional nature, the shorthand for that is like dependent arising, isn't it? Whereas the ultimate nature, the shorthand is the emptiness. Is that like the
yeah,
way to
yeah,
sort
yeah,
it out
yeah,
in your
that's fine.
mind?
Yeah, you could do that.
Yep.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah. So let's have a look at each of these things. So the profundity of the ultimate, like I said, this is the simplest. The emptiness of form is nothing other than form's ultimate nature. That's a really simple way you can put it. So, as we know, so forms, or a form is a composite phenomenon. It's made up of parts created through causes and conditions. Because it comes into being and continues to exist based on other causes and conditions, it is a dependent phenomenon.
Can you repeat that, please?
Because the form comes into existence based on its parts, its causes and conditions, it is a dependent phenomenon. It is dependent upon the cause and conditions. It is dependent upon its parts to be that form. This dependence means then, this dependence means that the form is consequently empty of any intrinsic nature. It has no intrinsic nature because it depends upon something else. So you can see something interesting there. One side is saying, one is like looking at the negative thing, the negative, emptiness, something that's not there. Well, what is there? The dependent arising, the dependent origination. If emptiness were not there, if intrinsic nature were there instead, you could not have causes and conditions, parts, and so forth. But because those are dependent, and intrinsic nature is not dependent. Intrinsic nature depends upon nothing whatsoever. And we've just so that can't be there, can it? That type of existence cannot be there if a dependent nature is there, because these two oppose one another. So form is the basis. Its character is to be empty of any intrinsic nature. That's the ultimate truth about the form. But form has no intrinsic nature. We say, okay, so what type of nature does the form have? You say, well, it obviously depends upon other things. It's a dependent arising.
And here's Kodo's garden,
Yeah.
and with all the vibrating atoms in it.
Yeah. So in terms of like us trying to become familiar with this, right? So the first object, form is empty. Our focus is on the emptiness of the form. Right? The ultimate nature of that form. That's what we're focused on. The next three, it's not. It's not the empty nature of the form. It's the conventional nature of the form. So conventionally, things exist depend upon other things, isn't it? So we have the garden. We find that plants are dependent upon seeds, soil, moisture, water. They depend upon all these other things. And when all those things come in, we have the actual seed. The seed gives rise to the little shoot, and finally it turns into the plant. The dependent arising of the plant, the origination of the plant depends for its arising upon the seed, the soil, and all those sort of things. The form is empty, so the empty nature of the form, meaning the dependent arising nature. The dependent arising nature of the form is the form.
Eddie, is that almost like saying that the form, the dependent arising, the form arises out of emptiness?
Yeah, as long as you don't think that emptiness is a thing that's existing out there and suddenly it comes out. So if you think that, no, that's wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more that, like you were saying before, the form and the emptiness go together.
Yeah, that's right. They're a single entity. Yeah. Whereas form has no inherent nature. This was the first thing. It was the ultimate truth of form. Form is empty of any intrinsic nature. There's none there. Right? Okay, so form, we're talking about something that does exist. You go, yep, the form. So it exists without any inherent nature. You go, yep. So what nature does it have? You go, well, a dependent origination, one of dependent origination. It depends upon other things. So we look at emptiness. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Because we're now on the conventional side. Remember, what we need to be looking at now is emptiness being no different than dependent origination. What do I mean by empty? Dependent arising. Whatever is dependently originating is empty of intrinsic nature. If it is empty of intrinsic nature and exists, it does so dependently. So these two are like hand in glove. One is this talking about what's not there, and the other saying what is there. Emptiness is saying this is not there, intrinsic nature. Dependent origination is saying this is what is there, the form, that's there. It depends upon all its parts, the cause and conditions, consciousness and aim. So I said this is the most difficult one to get your head around, but you can help yourself by remembering that we're talking about the conventional nature now. All these three have to do with the conventional nature. It was only the first one, is the ultimate nature, the ultimate truth about the form. Everything else is now about the conventional nature of this form. It's just not in ways that I'm familiar with. It's much more subtle. It's not just, I'm just not looking at color and shape and knowing that it's impermanent. We're talking about this form that does exist, having two natures, a conventional one and an ultimate one. And what's our problem, one of the major problems for us is we've mixed the two up. We're taking things that have conventional truth and thinking they're ultimately true. And in fact, they're not. They lack inherent nature. emptiness as form presents emptiness arising as dependent origination, thereby countering the extreme of nihilism, the belief that nothing exists. So it's the same when we go emptiness as form, we're not saying there isn't anything that exists. We're not saying that. We're not saying forms do not exist. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that form lacks certain qualities, is without these qualities. That's how it exists. It is without the qualities of inherent existence, and that allows it to exist. Being without these qualities of inherent existence, but with the qualities of dependent origination, of dependence, this form exists.
This
So
is
we're
your
saying
10-minute.
emptiness is form. We're indicating that emptiness is being affirmed as dependent origination. As you really look at emptiness, we're looking at a negation. It's saying
Stop the
something.
share, hun.
Oh, thank you, Ruthie. Yeah, so we're saying here, we're looking at emptiness. We're really looking at something that's not. Like when you look at an empty purse, it's something that's not there, isn't it? There's no money in the purse, right? So the purse is empty of money. But the money is something different than the purse. They're two different phenomena. But that's one way we can look at empty, isn't it? We have something and it's empty of something. Yeah, okay, let's take a form. What is it empty of? And we say intrinsic nature. It has no intrinsic truth nature, none at all. That's what's not there. And you can say, okay, so, but on the other side, that's the negatory side, the negation side, the negative. In terms of it's the positive, the affirming of form, there is form. That we affirm this form there is dependently existing.
Kodo has her hand raised.
Kodo's waving your hand. Where you go? Yep. We can't hear you, Kodo. I get it. I can't hear.
Form exists,
Yes.
but it's impermanent.
Yep.
Well,
right.
that's the inherent emptiness, right? Is that it's impermanent. It has no solid, graspable, forever, ever beingness.
That's right. It doesn't have that.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. And so what one of the things about impermanence, especially subtle impermanence, not the gross, but the subtle impermanence. Subtle impermanence can lead you right up to the doorway of emptiness. It really does. It's not the same, but it helps massively. You can get there and suddenly realize, oh my gosh, there's nothing to hold here.
So, Eddie, I think Kodo's just had an aha moment.
Well, that's very good.
Now that we know the whole meaning of the there it is.
Yeah.
You've got the blessing.
Okay, let me move along. Because I can see
You've got 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know. That's like I've got to move along. So the profundity of being the same entity, so the ultimate nature of form, its emptiness of form, does not exist separate from the form. I think we should all be able to get that. They don't exist like dogs and cows, or the shape of a person, the person being two separate things. They're one thing. The form and its emptiness are one entity. Now, this same entity, we can talk about it in different ways. We can actually talk about the form itself, or we could talk about the emptiness of that form, or rather experience the emptiness of the form. And the experience of the form depends upon us having a form, right? But when we experience the emptiness of the form, there's no form that's going to appear to us. But the emptiness of the form will appear. So we can distinguish these easily through the use of language. So we find this, we can do this with any type of phenomena, basically. You can talk about the two different aspects of it. So with the form we're talking about, you can either talk about the empty nature of it, or you can talk about the conventional nature. But remember, they are one entity. In fact, if we talk about the empty nature of the form, there's very little we could say, actually. We could just tell you what's not there. Okay, so let me move along now. So then, so that is on the path of accumulation and preparation. That four profundities, right? We're talking just like we are now, talking about it in terms of our understanding of it, our ideas of what emptiness is, what it's negating, and so forth, and then sitting down and actually putting it into practice. But when we hit the path of seeing, then we get to see the empty directly. And here, Avalokiteshvara says, now Shariputra, likewise, just as you found with the emptiness of form, all phenomena are emptiness. They are without any characteristics, they're unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. So here we're talking about like all phenomena, everything, right? And you can see here there's 8 sort of terms there. They're called the 8 empty aspects. And you can actually get these 8 and categorize them in another way called the 3 doors of emptiness. So the 8 empty aspects are all phenomena are emptiness. So that is their nature. Their deepest nature is that every phenomena, whatever they are, subject, object, they lack inherent existence. They are empty of inherent existence. Now these next ones, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain. These are categorized under the door of called signlessness, the door of signlessness. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what that means is that these phenomena are the causes. We're really looking up to emptiness, the nature of the phenomena itself. Down here, looking at the causes of phenomena. None of them, no cause of phenomena has any inherent existence. That's what it's showing. There are no signs that these causes have any inherent existence. And that's why it's called the door of signlessness.
And Eddie, that's the one that word trips me up every time because I don't even know it as a word. I often read it as singlessness, which is entirely wrong.
Yeah.
So signlessness without signs is
Without signs of inherent existence.
right.
All causes have no signs of inherent existence. And then the last 2 is called the door of wishlessness. So these are the 2 last wishes, right? That our negative qualities decrease and the good qualities increase. This increase and decrease takes place dependently. Decrease and increase has no inherent existence. And these are the results that we're seeking. So phenomena, causes, results, or causes, effects. All of them are empty. The door of wishlessness, what we wish to achieve, what we're seeking to achieve, the results, they have no inherent existence. The causes don't either, and the phenomena itself is also empty. Miffy.
So since this is the 8 empty aspects, if it
Yeah.
was conventional, we'd be thinking, oh, deficient and fulfilled, but because it's the emptiness aspect, we're going not deficient, not fulfilled, not fulfilled.
You're saying not inherently deficient, not inherently fulfilled.
Right. So there's this huge word inherently that's not even there,
No, that's
but
right.
that's what we should be putting in there.
Well, we need to understand this. For when the sutra was written, it was taken that everyone knows what we're talking about. But poor Cheryl didn't, for instance, and most people who first come to it from the West don't. They'll take it literally and you go, well, it's a problem. Yeah, so we've got to remember, we're always talking about it, and it's so common in the sutras. They just leave it out. Let's go empty. We heard the empty, and now, so that's on the path of seeing, remember? Then we move to the path of meditation. And so he goes on to say, Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. So here again, we have the five aggregates. Then he goes, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, and no mind. So now we're looking at the six senses. There's no eye, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. So the phenomena that exist dependently upon the six sources have no inherent existence. That's what's being said here. He says there's no I element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. So here we're really looking at what they call we have the six sense forces, six sense 12 sources, 18 constituents. In other words, is our senses, the consciousness associated with them, and the phenomena themselves have no inherent existence. They're all empty of inherent existence. Then he goes on to say, which is not here, but we'll see it next week, the 12 links in the pure way of their movement lacks inherent existence. The 12 links in their afflictive way lack inherent existence. The Four Noble Truths have no true existence. And the three realizations that arise and depends upon the wisdom have no true existence. So this where now we're talking about all the different objects. They lack inherent existence. Then we finally go along, and now we're looking at the qualities of the mind and the results of this wisdom on the path of no more learning. So the qualities are, here it says, the mind has no obscurations and it's without fear. The result of this transformation is they reach the end point of nirvana. And all the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, or future, they also completely awaken to this unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on this perfection of wisdom. Yeah. So now we get the teaching for those of bright and sharp capacity. So that's when the mantra is given, isn't it? And then what he says, tayata. So it is like this. So it says two things there. One should develop the perfection of wisdom in the following way. The thing to ask oneself is, or like it is thus, you know, it's interesting hearing those words. It is thus. What is thus? Our question, what is thus? And in this last bit, one should develop the perfection of wisdom in the following way, which is coming up. So it is thus. So Geshe Sopa said this amazing thing I've never forgotten, and I wrote it down. So it is thus means things exist in mere name. It's like this, everything exists in mere name. You should develop the perfection of wisdom in this following way. So he goes on, so that's the head of all the mantras. So we're talking about the body, speech, and mind of the person who's traveling to great enlightenment. So you see before, one should develop the perfection of wisdom in the following way. So we're talking about developing it, not actually possessing it right now. So you can see this is going to be like a causal phenomenon. So the ordinary person, the person who has the capacity to bring about enlightenment, needs to do this. Rely upon the five paths, gate, gate, paragati, parasamgati, bodhi, and so on. So gati means proceed or go onto the path of accumulation. Keep going onto the path of preparation. Prepare yourself for paragati, the path of seeing. Parasangati, path of meditation. And Bodhi, no more learning. So progress gradually through these different stages of learning until we realize the perfection of wisdom. And that's the word soha. You know, may my mind receive, absorb, and keep the blessings of the mantra. May they take root within us. And then we sort of come really close to the end, you know. So this is a summary. You know, so Avalokiteshvara sums up. He gives an answer for those of ordinary capacity like us. He gives one for those of really sharp capacity, the mantra. Then he sums it up. Just, should train the perfection of wisdom like that. Again, progressively cultivating these 5 paths. You know, and I would suggest that we're in the business of doing that. You know, we might not yet have entered a path of accumulation. Maybe we don't have the mind of enlightenment yet, but we are getting ready so that we can learn about the means to enter that, developing the mind of enlightenment, but bringing along with it this wisdom. All things existing in mere name. Yeah, the Buddha says to the assembly, and especially to Avalokiteshvara in this explanation, well said, well said. So I believe it is like that. Once you practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have chosen, and then everyone goes, yoo-hoo, happy, happy days, very, very happy. And they praise it, and they think, okay, this is what we've got to do. And at the very end of the sutra is this little colophon. It says, you know, this completes the Arya Bhagavati Prashna Paramita Sridhara Sutra. So this is like our first class is the brief overall. So you get some idea. Think about it. Read other material. If you come up with questions, that's great. Because the next 4 weeks, we're going to slow it down and actually bring into it some meditation and also this identifying the object to be negated, the most important of the 4 steps. So I hope to see you there. That I'll leave you with this. You have an outline of the text. You know those basic 4 headings: heading, homage, sutra, conclusion. Then you just fill it out with what you can remember, like a heart with 4 chambers, 4 parts. Now, the central theme of this whole sutra is this profound union of compassion and wisdom. It's not just the wisdom side, even though that's what it looks like. That's the obvious way it's going. Beneath it is the compassion, the paths, how to do it all. And this is what that says, one of the most amazing things about the sutra. It's the fact I've had 2 teachers that come here and ask us this question, and both times everyone forgot, everyone went straight to wisdom. They went emptiness. And the teacher just looks at you and goes, no. Yeah, oh my God, what is it? It's like the union of these 2. That's what's been
And
said.
I mean, Eddie, there's a hint in there too, because it's Avalokiteshvara. It's a conversation with Avalokiteshvara, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's got to give us a hint.
Okay. So next week we'll continue by engaging with this wisdom on the paths of accumulation and preparation, which, like I said, will lead us to the 4 profundities. But within that, I want to focus in on identifying the object to be negated, inherent existence. Because if we don't understand that that's what we're negating, we could negate, we will probably try and negate something else. So it won't bring about the benefit and the effect we're really seeking. So we've hit the time, so I hope it was useful and you got something from it. And whether we did or not, we heard these words. I think we in general appreciate them. So let's dedicate the merit of our understanding towards perfect awakening for the benefit of others. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures, and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. So we've come to the end of our class. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for making every day of my life meaningful and useful, talking about this material and trying to put it into practice. Thank you very much. And let's stay alive for one more week and practice Dharma. Okay, bye-bye everybody, and thank you.